Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. It's Tuesday night, so you know what that means. We've got Preds Power Hour, but not just Preds, because we're in our divisional preview series that you can go check out on YouTube, youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast, full episodes, clips, all that good stuff. A lot of views for the Red Wings edition. So a lot of folks want to know what we were doing with the Red Wings. We got some shorts coming out. We got a Vancouver Canucks one from last week coming out this evening, featuring Bryan talking about the Canucks from last week. So go check that out if you missed last week's episode on this very feed. Speaking of Bryan Bastin, he is here once again of ontheforecheck.com. Bryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm knocking out this, doing a little preview work, doing some writing tonight, and then tomorrow's game day. Gotta get up, get my routine in, straighten up a bunch of ties, all that kind of dorky stuff. And
Wait, what's your routine? Are you talking about your game day routine?
Yeah, I was.
Do you not have a routine? Do you not have a good luck tie? Do you have a first day at the office type deal? What is the Bryan Bastin game day routine?
Well, as anybody who knows, like who's seen me, I'm extra as hell. So I'll always put on at least a blazer or the tie maybe when I go to the game. So that's always been one of them. Eating probably 2 or 3 of the Hunt Brother pizzas they give us in the media lounge by myself. Also a good one.
Okay.
I'll eat a full dinner before I go to the game and end up eating pizza pretty much every single time too.
What's the go-to type? Is it pepperoni? Do you do cheese? What is it?
What's available? I mean, I'm going to be honest, like it's very good pizza for what it is, but it is still Hunt Brothers pizza. So it's, it's gas station pizza. And sometimes that's all you need, and it gets in there, but it
could be
really
a sponsor. Cool.
Cool.
It's a great read. It's what you need if it's available.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. it's like the CC's pizza slogan, it's like, it's $5. Ooh. Like but it's a hot and ready. It's $5 and you're like, it's hot and it's ready. That's all that matters.
I mean, what's weird too is like Costco pizza is the goat. And I think the combination of it being like $1.50 and then being a gigantic slice and being as greasy as humanly possible and being a perfect pizza is just this. It's just the perfect pizza. I used to go on my lunch break every day when I worked at a place that was right by a Costco and just walk in. They're like, "Sir, are you going in to shop?" Absolutely not. I'm going in there for that $1.30 pizza actually, and gonna go take a nap when I get back to the office because that's a lot. No, Costco's great. Costco pizza. Go. Not a sponsor, could be.
Yeah, shout Kirkland's. We love the Kirkland brand.
We love
Please
Kirkland's.
Reach out. We'll do it for free.
Yeah,
we love you.
We love backyard baseball. I don't know if y'all are still selling computer games. Let's get a gateway computer. Why not? Let's see what's happening. See what's happening. I need dial-up. Who doesn't need dial-up? All these things are things that Jeff Middleton has no idea what we're talking about.
Hey, I know some of them.
Did you
backyard baseball rolled?
Okay, so backyard baseball. Okay, so you were still in the Pablo Sanchez era. Like
yes, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
The GOAT, Pablo Sanchez. Yeah. Jeff, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited to listen to what you have to say on the Preds, Chase.
It's a big night. It's a big night. The Preds conversation that we'll be closing with here in our Central Division, because as you can see at the episode title, this is our Central Division preview this week. But before we get into our actual previews, Bryan, where do you want to start tonight?
Well, there's been some hockey, and not just rookie showcase hockey. On Monday, the Predators were down in Sunrise, Florida, to take on the Florida Panthers in a split squad game. They had a little double header. Among some of the guys that didn't play, obviously, we didn't see Philip Forsberg, who is technically still listed on injured reserve, although he'll probably come off of that as the season gets closer. Roman Josi, and I don't believe we saw Ryan O'Reilly either. But other than that, it was a lot of showcase of, you can get a pretty good look at Milwaukee, what their lineup's going to look like. Carl Taylor was down there coaching and, helping coach, and you're going to see, he's probably evaluating his team just as much as Brunette is evaluating the Preds. But unfortunately for the Predators, they weren't able to get much started at all. They dropped the first game 5-0. And in the second game, 5-2, UC Saros, in fact, in the second game gave up 4 goals, even though he did get barraged pretty quickly and early on in that game with not much of a defense in front of him. But scores don't matter. Stats don't really matter too much in preseason, but there was a lot of stuff that, you got a chance to look at some of these guys and where they may slot into the lineup if they make the lineup. And I think that there's a lot that, the coaches probably saw and witnessed. Again, one of the things Florida was so effective in both games in doing was Nashville. They rely on that rush for almost the entirety of their offense. So this early into the season. And once Florida was able to realize that was their way of generating offense, they sealed up the blue line in the defensive zone. And so Nashville, once they couldn't get into the zone off of the rush, then Florida just started pounding. And both games we saw Nashville eventually give away, bend and then eventually break. But it's preseason. Florida was playing a lot of their top guys in that second game. Sam Bennett, Tkachuk, just like all of those guys in there were just absolutely eating up the Preds and some of their rookie guys that were out there. So I wasn't surprised by it. Let's just say that. But again, it's preseason. There's only probably a handful of guys that we're looking at that are fighting to get onto the NHL roster on opening day. But I think that this is a lot about, looking at what the future is going to look like, but also getting the fans kind of ready for what this season and maybe the season after this is going to feel like. It's going to be a lot of growing pains, but new coach, new GM. Philip Forsberg is like that gif of John Travolta, walking into the room and looking around because there's not much left in that forward group. There's him, there's Colton Sissons, like there's not much left in there that he's played with. These are a lot of new guys. I mean, Preds, Brunette, I don't know if he's picked up on it yet, and if he has, it was a very good thing. But they talked quite a lot about Cole Smith being on the line with Philip Forsberg in practices last week, which I think honestly was just Preds Twitter way of being like, "Come on, guys, come on. What do you think? What do you think? Cole Smith on the first line? How do you feel about that?" So we're gonna see. But I mean, that's just because it's not necessarily that Cole Smith is that good, but he just might be a top 6 forward on this team just because they need a top 6 forward. They may not have any. So not a lot that you can take away from this. Askarov looked good, only gave up 1 goal in his appearance. We saw Troy Grosnick in the first game. It's been a while since we've seen him in the Preds organization, but good to have him back. So, there was a lot to talk about. But Jeff, did you see anything that stood out to you with these guys?
Oh, you're muted, Jeff.
Lots of penalties. Lots and lots of penalties. That was about the only thing that stood out, especially in that first game. It was brutal.
Ugly.
Obviously, it's preseason, so who really cares? But watching that, I didn't watch a ton. I didn't watch any of the second game. But
Nobody did.
The first game I caught, the first half of it. And there was some, I thought the power play didn't look terrible. I thought they moved the puck really well, but it was just, brutal. It was bad hockey. It was, you can take John Hines out of Nashville, but you can't take the John Hines out of the Predators, I guess, kind of thought process is what I had. Just it was stupid, dumb, awful penalties, consistently. I think they played half of the first period in that first game on the penalty kill. Wasn't good. And Andrew Brunette said it, he's figuring out all of the other stuff with his team. It's a new system, new, for some people, new line mates. It's going to take a little bit. And I think if we're going to glean anything from this preseason, it'll be from this next game in Tampa, or against Tampa at home. I think that'll be, I would expect to see more Nashville Predators starters in the lineup because it's the first preseason game at home, and there may not be, but that's what I would expect. It was just very sloppy.
But it's preseason; the games don't count. It's just a little appetizer, a bloomin' onion here,
right?
In the off season.
I will say,
I love me some bloomin' onion.
Yes,
bloomin'
me too.
Onion's the goat. Yeah.
I will say though, even though preseason games are meaningless and the scores are meaningless, it wouldn't be a game a game recap if I didn't give y'all some stats. Even though, again,
I'm ready.
You can put however much stock you want into them. I wouldn't advise much. A couple of things that I noticed from that first game. Anybody who was watching it, there was only one forward line in that group for the Predators that really did anything, was able to produce. And unfortunately, I think at 5-on-5 they weren't able to get on the board. Nobody did. But the line of Tommy Novak, Philip Tomasino, and Kiefer Sherwood. I think one of the only things holding that line back was Sherwood had a couple of penalties in the game, but they were pretty dominant. Both Tomasino and Novak had about 80% expected goal for percentage. So I mean, they were controlling both shot possession and really controlling shot quality. So they were generating a ton of chances there. And I think that's one of the things that stands out to me, even though, again, this is preseason, but Tommy Novak has been, last year was phenomenal. Just probably one of the better offensive players on the entire team last season. But on the flip side of that is Tommy Novak, performance-wise, was probably one of the worst defensive players on this team last season. And so we're seeing a lot of changes in his game a little bit. I think he is starting to he's out of that mindset of being, now he's on an NHL roster, so he's trying to score and try to earn his way. I think Tommy Novak's not going anywhere. I think that he's able to kind of sit and hopefully with a new system, it can work with his style, because he's very good in that kind of rush offense. But it's good to see him have a very solid defensive game, something that he didn't do very often. On the other side of that, though, we talked about him a second ago, but Cole Smith, just again, he was working with O'Reilly and Forsberg in practice, and then I think he was stuck on a line with Kalen Lynn and Cal O'Reilly. Cal O'Reilly is one of the PTOs even on the team, but that line was manhandled. It wasn't pretty. And again, I don't want to start the Cole Smith hate train, because it's a preseason game, and I would say you can put exactly as much stake into Cole Smith not playing well in that game as you can with Tommy Novak having a great game. Both could be true, couldn't be, may not be true. But I was impressed by that in the first game. In the second game, Tanner Molendyk, first round pick, he very much has an identity out there. I think he's very easy to see on the ice, especially when you're watching, streamed games from another arena. It might be hard to kind of track players and stuff, but you can kind of tell who Molendyk is when he's on the ice. He played a lot of really good hockey. And one of the things that I think I liked the most about his game was not necessarily a stat, but there was one play, I think middle of the second period, where he had a really great offensive chance and just turned the puck over. Just not a great move, just handed it right over. But he was able to get down all the way to the other end of the ice and stop the rush going the other way. And it was impressive, and it was so impressive that Hal Gill on the radio said that was a patented Hal Gill move, that you get back really well and play defense really awesome, but you were the one who caused the turnover in the first place. So he said that was his move, and he recognized that from Molendyk. But I'm excited to see how he develops, and again, I think tomorrow, seeing him in person, I think it'll be a much clearer view of what this team will look like. But it's still early.
Absolutely. Bryan, where are we going next?
Yeah, so real quick before we move on to the rest of the division, so we had a handful of players today get reassigned back down to the juniors. Guys like Kalen Lind, who I think had a pretty good preseason, Austin Royce, Joey Willis, Dylan McKinnon, Graham Sward, and Austin Elliott and Owen Flores, two goaltenders. All of those 7 players have been reassigned. I think the WHL and the OHL, I think both started this week. I think a couple of those teams have already played a game actually without those guys, but they're heading back. And so the Nashville Predators are now left with 54 players on the roster. They won't have a ton to trim down going forward out of this. I think that there's only a handful of guys I think that are really, borderline as to whether or not they're going to make the roster. I think the PTO guys probably aren't going to make it. And that's about what you expect. Not everybody can come in and on a professional tryout contract and come in and earn an NHL spot. But I think the rosters, we're getting closer to seeing what this team is going to look like. And, it looks like something right now. It is not the same Nashville Predators team that we've seen in years past. This is rebuild mode, and it's going to be rough, but we've all been ready, and now it's time for us to back it up and be happy about it, because that's what we've wanted for several years now.
All right. Central Division we're getting into here that will include the Predators that we have talked about here at the top of this very program. But we first start off with a team that had Lady Luck on their side in the lottery this year. And speaking of rebuilds, a rebuild that might not be as arduous as we had maybe anticipated for this particular franchise in the last 2 years and what they were facing. But what do you make of a lot of changes here in Chicago this offseason, Jeff Middleton?
Yeah, I mean, no matter which way you look at it, they won the offseason, right? They ended with the first overall pick, and I thought their other pick in the first round, that Oliver Moore at 19, was phenomenal. Kyle Davidson was also a big fan of that, from that little mic'd up thing that they did. I thought that was really a really cool addition. Yeah, I mean, you could say it doesn't really matter what else they did this offseason, as long as they got Connor Bedard, it was the right way. I mean, they're going the right way. But I mean, they added some depth guys. They had some veteran players. They're going to have some more young players in their lineup. They're not. I don't think Connor Bedard is going to be good enough to single-handedly carry them to a playoff spot, unless he helps new addition Taylor Hall out on that front, on the scoring front. They still have Andreas Athanasiou as a second line winger. And then, I mean, their top six is still, it's coming into form, but it's not exactly what I would consider playoff caliber.
Mm-hmm.
You have Bedard and another young kid, Lucas Reichel, probably at the top. I mean, Bedard's going to be at the top, but Reichel's going to be in the middle six. Tyler Johnson, veteran guy, won a couple Stanley Cups, not too bad. Philip Kurashev, could have been picked by the Nashville Predators, but they traded that pick away for Ryan Hartman. He is still around in Chicago. Brought in Nick Foligno, who actually I think is having he's been kind of the guy for Connor Bedard, it appears. Just looking through, some videos taken and interviews and all that kind of stuff, it feels like he's kind of the leading veteran voice in that locker room. And, everybody's favorite player, Corey Perry, is also on everybody's favorite team now. So yeah, that'll be fun to watch over the course of this next season. Just seeing how he kind of molds into that, I would assume, the bottom six, and see what kind of role he takes with Connor Bedard and Reichel and all these young guys. Still have Seth Jones on that insane contract. He's not going anywhere for a while. The big name in the defense is probably the biggest name in the defense is probably going to be Kevin Korchinski. I had a tweet about him and Connor Bedard kind of working in tandem on a rush play, specifically in one of their prospect showcase games against the Wild. He's a phenomenal skater, great offensively minded defenseman. He can move the puck really well, and watching him, Bedard go through the neutral zone and stop in the offensive zone, drop the puck off to Korchinski, and him come through and skate around the net at full speed and then give it back to Bedard. It was just gorgeous hockey. So yeah, that's going to be fun. It'll be interesting to see how he adapts. End of the day, I don't think they're going to be that good, but they're a team to follow all year, just because of some of the names in their lineup. I think, that's kind of about it. They don't have, still got Colin Blackwell, although I think he's hurt. Their goaltending situation will be interesting. Peter Mrazek stuck around. Arvid Soderblom is a guy. I don't know. I mean, they have a lot of, they're an interesting team because they have these, big prospect names, and they got some guys like Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno who and then you kind of look around and you're like, I don't, there's still some of these guys that I never, I don't know who these people are. But that's kind of the state of where they are now. They're going in the right direction, but they still have some work to do.
Yeah, I mean, Bryan, when you look at this roster and what they were this past year and what Jeff just outlined, do you think that they're primed to hop back in the playoffs sooner rather than later? What does their trajectory now look like with how this offseason's gone?
So I will say I think they will be better than they were last season, and I think that's
a low bar.
Yeah, I'm not sticking my neck out very far with that one. I think that it's going to be very odd because there is no Patrick Kane, there's no Jonathan Toews anymore in Chicago. It's kind of it's kind of bizarre seeing that now you're talking about Taylor Hall and Connor Bedard and Nick Foligno, some of these guys that you've seen in other places, now they're there. But it's their third pairing is probably going to be Nikita Zaitsev and Jared Tenorti, which is not great. I think Seth Jones has come up a little bit from kind of the cratering his career has taken the past couple of years, but this isn't a good team. I mean, it's going to be, I think eventually there's going to be a lot of flash, and I think there'll be a lot of potential for it. But I mean, by the time this team is good enough to actually compete for a playoff spot, you're probably not going to see guys like Taylor Hall there anymore. It's probably going to look a little bit different. But that being said, even with any improvements that they may make, as we'll discover as we go down these previews, there's no room for a fourth team from the Central to be in these playoffs. It's not going to happen. And there's just a huge gap between the haves and have-nots in this division. And so no matter, Chicago could improve by a ton, and they're still not going to be in the playoffs. And I think that's fine with the way that they're rebuilding now. I think that they're okay with that.
Yeah, I think the hope is that they're fun. They don't have to be good.
Fun
they
bad.
Just have to be fun. Yeah, fun bad. Like
who was the last fun bad team in the NHL?
2 years ago, Ottawa Senators.
Oh, okay.
Or last year's Ottawa Senators, to be honest.
The Ottawa Senators the last decade.
Yeah.
The Ottawa Senators since they've been up for sale.
Fun is a strong word to ever describe the Senators, but
hey, DeBrincat, Stützle, Giroux, Sanderson, all those guys, they had the makeup of a Chicago Blackhawks team with a little bit better roster, but they conceded goals like no other team I've seen. So, they couldn't outscore their problems.
There you go. Next up in the Central Division, we've got the Arizona Coyotes. Bryan, not only was this team bad last year, 28, 40, and 14, they also are playing in an arena that is smaller than my hometown Atlanta Gladiators for the foreseeable future. So what, if you had to get the good folks over there in Coyote country excited about this offseason, how do you go about it? Or do you think this is just going to be rough once again?
You know what? I think that Coyotes fans deserve something to look forward to because, boy, have they been through a lot in the past few years. We talk about Chicago getting the number one pick and being able to get Bedard. Meanwhile, the Coyotes didn't have a pick because they talked to, I think it was a prospect or something like outside of the time. I mean, it was a very college football, esque type of penalty. And so, they have had literally, it seems like, everything going against them the last few years. And, things are still in flux. Who knows? There's been talk about Atlanta. There's been talk about, other places. And so they have lived under that threat for a while. But there are a few things I think that they can look forward to. Obviously, last year, just another bad team. I think they in Chicago were bottom 5 in the league in pretty much every basic stat at 5-on-5 offense, goals scored, goals against. Just not a very good team at all. When they were pretty decent, or like when they played the Predators, that's also when they would show up. They had one line that was Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. Those are guys that obviously are driving that team, or the team is built around them for better or worse. It's like having a really nice hood ornament on the hoopty you drive around that doesn't, that has a hole in the gas tank. But they did a few things. They were kind of busy. They brought in a bunch of guys. They signed Jason Zucker for a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. But I brought in Matt Dumba and Alex Kerfoot, Troy Stetcher, Travis Dermott. I mean, Nick Bustag. These are guys that you're like, oh, that's right. Like they're in Arizona now. They brought in a lot of guys, and they had to replace a lot of guys, people that, Zach Cassian and Christian Fisher, Brett Ritchie, Patrick Nemeth, like those types of guys. They're all gone. But you know, I think they have a couple things that they can really look forward to, and one of those is, you know, their goaltending duo. I think is going to be a little bit better than they were last year, mostly because again they have to be a little bit better. Karel Vejmelka, sorry, you know, he looked pretty good last season for the most part, 18, 24, and 6, which again, keeping in mind the Coyotes record. But you know, who came up behind him towards the end of the season, he struggled at first, was our very own Connor Ingram. As you remember, he was cut right before the season began last year, went over to Arizona and played well enough to get a 3-year, $1.9 million extension for the Coyotes. And it's awesome to see that. He went 6, 13, and 8, but in those 27 games, he did have a 90.7 save percentage. So that's one thing to be excited about. The second thing is, oh boy, Logan Cooley. The kid is... I think he would be getting almost all of the Calder hype if Bedard didn't exist. I mean, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go, and I went back and I watched a little bit, and I kind of watched some footage from their games, and like, oh, this kid's real good. You know, obviously you're probably going. I don't know if they'll immediately stick him up there with Keller and Schmaltz, but you know, probably going to be fun to do it.
I think they should.
They should
for the entertainment.
Yeah,
at the very least.
I mean, what his freshman year at Minnesota last year had 60 points in 39 games. I mean,
he was almost 2 points per game.
Like ridiculous numbers, and he is just electric. I know, Jeff, you could probably tell me, you know, say more about him than I can, but boy, he's fun to watch. And this is on a team that there's not a bunch of players where you can say, you know, yeah, they're really fun to watch, just because it's, you know, it's a patchwork team, like a lot of these teams at the bottom of the Central. You know, you got some of these veterans who've come in like Dumba and Zucker, Kerfoot, but like they're not going to be game changers. This is all about, you know, maintaining, treading water, getting better, seeing what you have. I mean, this is a team that's got a lot of improvement to do, and it's even more difficult because, you know, free agents may not want to look at Arizona for a long-term deal because they don't know if that team will still be in Arizona. And so they're going through it. I think that if you're an Arizona fan, you've got to just hold fast. I think this is a franchise that needs to be in the NHL. It's a tough market, but, you know, hopefully I think things will turn around in the next few years. But right now, again, like Chicago, Arizona, we're at the bottom of the Central, bottom of the league, and they're probably going to be there again this year.
Yeah. And also,
that's okay. That's okay.
That is okay. But also for the sport, like, you just don't want this looming over the sport every year. Like, what are the Coyotes doing? It's a very tired talking point. You're just like, it's not healthy. Like, just pick a direction, whatever you're going to do, and just run with it, because it's just that looming cloud over this franchise for, I mean, how many years has it been that there's been questions about their viability in Arizona now? What are we at? We're over a decade, right?
Been a long time.
Yeah. It seems like it was, I mean, yeah, I mean, I remember vaguely, I remember all the talk when the Nashville was threatened to move. But like, no, it seems like Arizona has been one of those that's always been kind of on the chopping block, you know, which is funny because you're seeing expansion teams working out so well right now. But yeah, I mean, it's just something that they're going to have to do something in the next few years in order to cement their spot and say, hey, we deserve to stay. Unfortunately, it just hasn't been their on-ice product for quite some time. No.
Who has had a good on-ice product, a Stanley Cup run in the not too distant past. All it took was fire. You just got to fire your coach sometimes in the middle of the year, and you never know what you can accomplish when you make that change in the middle of the year. One of those teams that benefited from that a couple of years ago was the St. Louis Blues, who were right there, 37, 38, and 7. If you're a stat guy, I feel like this is just a very nice stat, like a nice record to look at. Like that's a fun record. 37, 38, and 7 is just nice. I like to read that. But Jeff, is St. Louis going in one direction or the other, or are they stuck in neutral right there in the middle of this division based on what they did this offseason?
Well, I'd have to say that they're stuck in neutral. I don't think that their offseason was that good. I mean, they brought in Kevin Hayes. You know, he can still be viable. In Philly, he was good. And that, they still have names, Buchnevich, Thomas, and Kyrou as a first line definitely isn't a bad thing. And then they have Brandon Saad and Braden Shen on the second line. Braden Shen, their newest captain. But they still have some defensive things to work out. I don't think it's as good as as it could be. Colton Parayko and Justin Falk and Torrey Krug as a three aren't bad. But I don't think Nick Leddy isn't. Nick Leddy's fine. Scott Perunovich is going. Hopefully he gets better. Robert Bertuzzo is not very good. Shout out to Robert Bertuzzo and all the Preds fans that love him so dearly. And their goaltending, I think, Joel Hofer was good last year. I thought he was, he helped out a bit. But Jordan Bennington's still being paid a lot of money to not be as good as as good as the money says he should be.
All-time run though, Jordan Bennington. He'll always have that run. He's never paying for food in St. Louis ever. Yeah, no. They brought back Oscar Sundqvist, who he could be a solid depth guy. It's just there's nothing that's like stands out about this team. Jacob Vrana's still there. Alexei Torpchenko is a player that he could slot in the forward group. Sammy Blais is there. Jake Neighbors is young guy, can definitely make it. He could definitely carve out a spot in there. It's just a lot of names, and it's not really trending one direction or the other. They have some young guys in there that could make an impact in the bottom or middle six, but their top line isn't bad, but then they kind of just have a who's who of either older players or middle of their career guys that aren't gonna they won't get much better after this.
A real who's who of who?
That was the saddest. This guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. There wasn't any raise. Even with the Blackhawks, you have some raise where hey, this guy.
There's names in there, and I mean Jordan Kyrou, he's gonna score a bajillion points. He's such a good player. Robert Thomas is gonna help him score a bajillion points, and will score a bajillion points by helping Kyrou score a bajillion points. I just don't, there's not a ton there that stands out to you. And a lot of Blues fans were calling for Craig Berube's head last year and they didn't get what they wanted. So he's still around. And I think part of that, I think that's going to be a problem. I don't know if he makes it through the year. I mean, we've seen him turn a team around into a Stanley Cup champion. So I guess you never really do know with this dumb sport, but it's, they're just kind of in that middle ground.
It's hard because this is a team that in the last 2 years, I mean, Ryan O'Reilly is in Nashville now. He got traded at the deadline to Toronto last year. Tarasenko, that whole gambit with the GM did not pay off. And now he's enjoying life in Vegas.
In Ottawa.
Yeah. And then Vince Dunn in Seattle. I mean, I talked about Vince Dunn the other last week, I believe. And, these are all players that St. Louis lost for basically nothing. The goaltending, like you said, they may have had the most hateable goaltending duo in the league last year between Thomas Greiss and Jordan Bennington. It'll be cool. I think they did bring in Malcolm Subban, which is always cool to see. I suppose he's not very good, but he's making his rounds of Central Division bottom feeding teams, it seems like. And but yeah, there's not much. And I think honestly they're in a rough spot because it's not like this is okay, we've knocked everything down, we've knocked all the walls down, now it's time to start building. The foundation is still creaky as hell, I think, right now.
But and I think part of it's their cap situation. Their cap situation is just it's rough. They're paying 4 different guys $6.5 million. There's Braden Shen, Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, and Colton Parayko. They're all being paid $6.5 million, all for at least 4 years. It's for the next 4 years. It's not good. And then you got Kyrou and Thomas making both 8.125 per year for the foreseeable until past 2028, 29.
Very smooth.
Pavel Buchnevich is $5.8 million for the next 2 years. Brandon Saad is making $4.5 million for the next 3. It's just a lot of money to be given out to. Kasperi Kapanen's making 3.2 this year. It's just a lot of money to be given out to guys who, you know, they're not bad players necessarily. And, you know, the Kyrou and the Robert Thomas contracts, I would argue, are actually not bad. But 4 guys worth $6.5 million is just, that's a lot of money. And so it's not like they can go out and get guys to, you know, shore up the bottom 6 or shore up the middle 6. Like they're just kind of stuck with what they got right now.
Go Blues. They're just stuck with where they got right now. That's the headline for that one. The Winnipeg Jets, Brian Bastin, 46-33-3 a season ago. Do they build off it? Do they get to 50 wins based on what they did this offseason? What say you, Brian Bastin?
They're an interesting team. You know, obviously they bought out Blake Wheeler's contract, traded Pierre-Luc Dubois last year. You know, in exchange in that Dubois trade, they sent over, I think, Dubois in a 2nd round pick and got back Gabe Velarde, Alex Iafallo, 2 guys I like enough. I think they're pretty decent players to watch, as well as Rasmus Kupari. But I mean, they're having to take, there's people having to step in from some longtime Jets players, guys that we used to see, you know, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago when the Winnipeg and Nashville rivalry was so good, and we had 10 guys in each penalty box that game. You know, so some of these guys are gone. I mean, gone are the days of Patrick Laine and Blake Wheeler and all of them. But they still, you know, they're still a pretty decent team. You know, Josh Morrissey had one heck of a year last year. Pionk, DeMella Dillon, and Schmidt are all there. They did sign Laurent Brossoit, I believe, which is a guy that I always thought he was going to catch on in Tampa, but has kind of seemed to jump around from team to team. You know, Connor Hellebuck started, I think, the most games, even though he didn't have as much time on ice as UC Saros did. Started up, I think, 64 games last season, which, you know, you look at 2 of the young, exciting goaltenders in the NHL, and UC Saros and Connor Hellebuck, and they played nearly, you know, 130 games between them last season. You know, you don't want to push these guys into early retirement because you're making them play 70 games a season. You know, but they still have a lot of good players, and I think they've got a really solid top 6. You know, you've got Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, you know, Ehlers, Adam Laurie, like those. That's a very solid, I think, top 6, and I think that they've done enough to kind of maintain, you know, equilibrium where they're at right now. I'm still not super sold on, you know, are they a team that is changed enough that they could push for a playoff spot in the Central? You know, this is a contract year for Scheifele and Hellebuck, and we've heard about, you know, Hellebuck possibly wanting out, which I could see that happening. You know, a lot of the trade of Dubois, you know, and those 3 guys they got back from Los Angeles, like they're going to have to show that they are worth that trade. And, you know, is Morrissey going to be able to continue? I think he will. I like him a lot in the way that he plays, but there's nothing on this. I mean, there's nobody on this roster that really is like, oh, like this is a guy that could drive them and get them an extra 10 wins, you know, that they wouldn't normally have. I think that they're a better team than I think probably most of the teams we've talked about so far, which kind of, you know, it shook out that way in the playoffs, it seemed, last year too. But, you know, they are just somebody that's a team that doesn't really scream out that they're going to be contenders. They could be, and I think they have the potential to, you know, have a, you know, higher ceiling than we might expect, and they may contend. I don't think that they're, you know, you could put them into the same group as Chicago and Arizona and them, but, you know,
are they a deadline team to watch where they're going to be close and then they could do a couple things and then that kind of catapults them into that top tier?
I would say that if they're having a very good year, like way better than expected, I could maybe see it, but they're going to be a deadline team, I think, in the other way. I think they're going to look to cash out on the Hellebuck situation, which they're smart to do that, I think, because I don't know that Hellebuck's going to want to stay. Kind of like, and you know, it's kind of the different situation than what we talked about with John Gibson. Like, you know, Hellebuck it's not often that a guy can come on the market who's like a top 3 at his position, but, you know, I think that if Winnipeg, really wants to work on, figure out what they want to do with him. And if they don't think that they can re-sign him, then yeah, flipping him at the deadline would probably be huge for him. So again, a good team. They're not in that bottom tier of Central Division teams. And I think that they finished kind of around the same record this year. But, we're going to see, what happens if this team, if Hellebuck gets injured.
Yeah.
What's this team look like? So yeah, I think they're kind of middle of the pack because they're just not good enough to be with the top, 4 teams in this division, but not bad enough to be in the bottom either. So there's a chance, there's an outside shot at the playoffs, but I think just with the competition and the improvements that other teams around them made, I just don't see that happening this season.
Oof, man, this division's sad. This division is not nearly as much fun as necessary, but something tells me the next 3 teams, or at least 2 teams from now, will be. I
will say this:
yes,
the Central gives me big like MAC vibes, like college football vibes. Where like the bottom.
Oh no, some action! You're speaking Jeff's language. Miami, Ohio, go Redhawks!
Woo! Go Redhawks!
Oh my goodness, Frank Solich, shout out! Like, yeah, there you go. Wow, I had not considered that they were the MAC of the NHL, but you don't want to be in that spot. You don't want to be the MAC of the NHL. I don't think at this point. No offense, Jeff. But speaking of Jeff Middleton here, the Minnesota Wild right there with Winnipeg last year, 46, 25, and 11. Sir, are you more optimistic about their offseason, and especially in comparison to Winnipeg, who they're right there with? Are you more optimistic than where Bryan has the Jets going into next year?
I mean, I don't know if I'd say more optimistic. I like they're kind of, you want to talk about a team kind of screwed by the salary cap. They have to process the Ryan Suter and the Zach Parise buyouts, which kind of leaves them empty-handed in terms of being able to go out and acquire players or make their lineup a little better. Their lineup is still very good. You have Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, Matt Zuccarello, Joel Eriksson-Ek. Marco Rossi's probably going to slot in there full time, at least hopefully. I think Freddie Gaudreau, former Pred, Bryan's guy. Ryan Hartman, first line center, of course. Everyone saw that coming. 30-goal man. You're muted, Bryan. Oh. Okay.
I was gonna say I saw it coming, but that's just me being biased.
Fair enough.
I also have Dennis Reynolds stuck in my head when he said that, because I was like, I'm a 5-star man. I'm a 5-star man. That's just stuck in my head. Anyway, go ahead.
Let's see. Let's see what else. What else is there with the Wild? They have. Oh, my guy. Of course, my guy Jacob Middleton. The fantastic mustache. Very good last name. My favorite last name in all of the NHL. And just a good defenseman too. Him and Jared Spurgeon are nuts. That pairing is crazy good. And Jonas Brodin, arguably the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. And then another 2 guys, Kalen Addison, Brock Faber, 2 young guys in that defense core who are looking to kind of step up in full-time roles, and you have Alex Goligoski, who actually wasn't that bad last year. I enjoyed watching him with the Wild. And then I think the one move that they kind of caught everyone's eye with was getting Pat Maroon. So that's fun, I guess. He's gonna protect those young guys, and he's gonna protect Kirill Kaprizov. I can tell you that much. And yeah, I mean, you have Philip Gustafson, who had a fantastic year last year. Was throwing himself into some Vezina talks by the end of last year. He was very, very good. And obviously the Wild and their system under Dean Evison are going to hope that that's, able to be recreated this year. And Marc-Andre Flower, he's still there, kicking it. Up north, but yeah, he's a solid backup at this point. And there are always times when he looks like a starter, but I think Philip Gustafson has the reins as of now. But yeah, not a team that did a ton this offseason. But they're they didn't get worse. I don't think that roster is any worse than it was last year. Especially if Marco Rossi can turn into what everyone believes he can turn into, myself included. I'd expect them to be, second or third in the division.
There you go. Finally, before we get into the Nashville Predators here, the two big dogs of the division. One of these teams is actually predicted to win the Stanley Cup. The best odds right out of the gate to win the Stanley Cup. The Colorado Avalanche here. Oh, wait. Actually, I skipped over Dallas. My bad. The Dallas Stars, who are right there. But to be fair, the Dallas Stars plus 1,700, they're in the top 10. And obviously had a great year to close last year. Brian Bastin, what say you about the Dallas Stars who made that jump 47-21 and 14 a year ago? Is it sustainable, Brian? Is the offense ever going away?
It pains me to say, but boy, Dallas is going to be really, really good. I think that what they did over the offseason really, and it's not necessarily that they went out and did anything huge themselves. It was just that, one, some things fell in their lap, and two, they didn't have much need to go out there and grab, some really key guys. I mean, the guys that left, like key departures from last year, are like guys like Luke Glendening, Colin Miller, Max Domi. Like, that's, in my eyes, trimming fat at this point. And instead they bring in a couple of guys that, we'll all be familiar with. Of course, Matt Duchene comes in 1-year deal. I think he is going to absolutely thrive. I don't know that he's going to go and immediately, take up like top line time, but I think he's going to be better than he was in Nashville last year, which is probably going to be true for a lot of players from Nashville last year. But I think he's going to do back. And then, of course, another one of my old favorites. They also brought in Craig Smith to be in the bottom six. The man, all he does is play hockey and score around 15 to 20 goals every year. And that's what he's done, since Nashville. Now it was in Boston, I think Pittsburgh, and then here Dallas. Of course, I can't talk about Dallas without talking about one of my favorite players for a lot of reasons in the entire NHL, and that's Jason Robertson, who is just a beast. I mean, just a fantastic. I mean, I'm going to say, for my money, I think he is probably going to be one of the most premier players in the entire NHL here, in a year or two's time, as far as just recognition, what he does. I think he has just exploded on, it feels like, he didn't have an adjustment period. He just came in, he's like, oh yeah, this is where I belong. Put me here on, in the top six, because that's where I should be. And you guys can all thank me for blessing you with my presence. And he should feel like that, because the man is very, very good. And I think that, he can make a run at 50, 60, goals even this year if he wants to. But, again, like, their forward depth, they got rid of some guys that were, replacement level at best, came in and brought in some guys that are better. The defensive core, Colin Miller is obviously the big loss there, but they still have a lot of guys from last year. And then, not to mention, you still have Pavelski, Rupe Hintz, Jamie Benn, Jamie Benn, who is a tough player, is really good, doesn't go down easy. And, and then Tyler Seguin as well, so this is a good offense. But I will say that I think my favorite thing that they did, and this is just because of what I got to watch, is they've got Maverick Bourque. And I think Maverick Bourque I watched him really just give Milwaukee all kinds of hell last year in the AHL. He very much has that, bull in a china shop type of play. But I mean, he's just very effective. I think he started to stand out to me so much that, like, he was one of the most noticeable players on the ice from, for either team, including Milwaukee, just because he was everywhere. He was making a ton of plays, and I really like him. And I know that they'd like to keep him there in Texas in the AHL thing, but I think that you're going to see probably 20 plus games for Maverick Bourque.
That's an all-time great hockey name.
Mm-hmm.
Maverick Bourque is a villain in Disney 4, the Mighty Ducks movie 4. Like, that is a full-on just Gunnar Stahl type name. That is, oof.
Mm-hmm.
I like that name.
And of course, everybody's the greatest Bork in all of hockey, which is old Gabby Bork, right?
Gabby Bork.
Former Nashville legend.
Gabby Bork. There's hockey names. There's one of the
I wouldn't
this is a
expect you to
sport
know
where
him.
I mean, this is also a sport where you could tell any average hockey fan, like even like a good hockey fan, like, hey, what do you think about so and so, and make up just a name, and they're gonna be like, yeah, I think they're gonna be all right on the Flames. Like, we'll see how it goes, but it's just funny, like Maverick Bork. Like, what are we doing? It's great.
It was a guy that there was a couple of guys last year in the Calder Cup playoffs when we were watching, we were going through those and covering those that really stood out to me. And, some guys out over in Coachella Valley, obviously. But Maverick Bork, he's just a lot of fun to watch. And Milwaukee and Texas games in the AHL are no joke. I think they get pretty rough, not quite as rough as Milwaukee and the Iowa Wild do, because they seem to like get into full on Waffle House parking lot fist fights every time they play.
That we respect and appreciate.
Of course. I mean, I think it was the Wild where Askarov got in his fight.
Did he really?
Oh, yes.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
Yep.
Yeah, Askarov is he's so fun. But this is a team that really, they're a very good team. And I think that even though they didn't do a whole lot of stuff, they still managed somehow to get better. Again,
do we like their uniform change?
For the most part, I will say this, those glow in the dark ones that they had, last season was the first year they had those.
Yeah.
I went from hating those to actually really liking them.
Those actually slap. I like those.
Yeah, it's a sometimes uniform.
I've gone back and forth.
There's nothing like the middle school crossing guard look, right?
I think it was cool for what they were used for. I'm finding it's getting harder and harder to find reasons to doubt the Stars.
You know who the biggest Stars celebrity fan is, Brian?
Who is that?
Friend of the pod, Miss Luann Stevens, Grandma Saracen.
Of course.
Season ticket holder for the Stars.
I was going to say Dak Prescott, but never mind.
Yeah. That's also true.
Well, one final team, the team that I accidentally eliminated as to what their kind of season they're headed into, the Colorado Avalanche. Have you heard about them? Have you seen this? The Colorado Avalanche, really good at hockey and are going to probably be really good again based on what they did this offseason in their young core here. 51, 24, and 7. Jeff, what say you about the Avs, and are they going to run this division once again this year?
Yeah, they're very good, and they're going to stay good. They lost Gabe Landeskog for likely the full season, which is a blow. He's their captain, and he's a very, very good hockey player in both ends of the ice. But Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, two guys that aren't too bad. Valeri Nichushkin, he's analytics darling. He's in there. But the names that they brought in were the talking points of the offseason. Brought in Jonathan Drouin for cheap, not they didn't have to, low cost, low risk, for a guy who has proven that he has talent. Miles Wood, another guy who can I think that they're gonna love him in Colorado. He's a scrappy guy with lots of speed, and as long as he can stay healthy, he's gonna help them. Tomas Tatar, skill guy who can score goals. Yeah, he's gonna be effective in that system. He was I enjoyed watching him in New Jersey last year. I thought he was a good counterpart to Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt and Nico Hischier and those guys. He's a good puck mover, and he can he's gonna help out. Ross Colton, another guy who's gonna be good. He was great in Tampa. Good forechecker, strong physically. Great shootout move that I love to watch every single time. I will watch it a billion times every time he does it. And then the name.
Speaking of shootout moves.
Yeah, I was about to say, speaking of shootout moves, the name that everybody's been waiting for, Ryan Johansson. There you go. He's in Colorado now, and I think he's gonna be pretty good. I don't think he's gonna be 2020, 21 or 2021, 22 Ryan Johansson, but he's gonna be good. He's gonna be surrounded by excellent players, and I think that's gonna really help him. Their defense core is still phenomenal. Cale Makar and Devin Tays, first pair, extremely jealous. And then Bowen Byram, really good defenseman. If he can stay healthy, man, he's going to be putting on a show this year. Josh Manson, who has been an underrated part of that defense core, I think he's really good. Josh Manson is a very good defender. And Jack Johnson, everybody's favorite, and Sammy Girard, former Pred, baby. And their goaltending situation is a little bit of a question mark. Alexander Georgiev's going to be their starter, but with Pablo Francouz probably out for a little bit longer, do they look to trade for somebody, or do they have an internal helper? I suggested in an article I wrote that they should trade for Dan Vladar. It'll help both teams. I think Dan Vladar can be a very good goalie still. And I think that, giving him to a team like Colorado where he doesn't have a ton of pressure on him, while also the Flames, receiving a pick back and giving Dustin Wolf that spot, more importantly. I think that would help both teams, but you never know. They might not go after any goalie. They might just wait it out. Colorado's
Georgiev's is such a funny thing because, again, like, you're right, they could use some help there, but at the same time, that man is going to coast off the rest of his career, my good graces for his role in hastening the end of the Tony DeAngelo experience in New York, as reportedly being the one that punched DeAngelo in the face when they were both with the Rangers. So the man's always going to live in my good graces for that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, they're going to be good. They were good last year, and I think they're going to be good again.
Are they the favorites for you to win the Stanley Cup? Do you agree that they are the best team going into this year?
Probably not favorites like over the entire league. I mean, I think they're the favorites to win the Central. I think it'll be tight between them and Dallas, but I'd probably have them above Dallas. But yeah, no, I think they're probably a top 3 team in that top 3 or 5 team for sure.
I think Dallas wins the Central.
Oh,
I don't think that's a hot take. I think Dallas.
It's not
is
a hot
good.
take. I think that Dallas has better goaltending, and they've added, again, out of Johansson. Johansson's going to thrive. He's a playmaker. He's not the Johansson he was in CBJ, but that's not what he's been asked to do for years now. I think he's going to be very impactful. Devin Tays is going to be an unrestricted free agent after this season. He is one of those guys that I have slammed a desk saying that Nashville should try to get in on. I love Devin Tays so much. And, I think though that, Dallas just has more things going for them. I think they played without Landeskog last season, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, they've moved, like, they're pretty much past the point of being, we're having to replace him. I mean, you can have Johansson kind of step into that, and they're only getting Joey for $4 million because Nashville has the other 4. Yeah. And so, I like Dallas, their roster up and down a lot more. I don't know if they've got they may not have a Nathan McKinnon and a Mikko Rantanen and a Cale Makar and a Devin Tays, but it's consistency. And Peter DeBoer has just continually proved me wrong, because I thought that was such an awful hire for them when they brought him in, and they turned around and went, yeah, well, watch this. So I really think, but again, like, it's going to be a battle between these two teams, because again, the top of the Central, there's these teams, then there's maybe Minnesota and Winnipeg, and then there's everybody else. I don't think there's any, if they could only take 2 teams from the Central in the playoffs this year, they probably would, just because those, I think, are the only 2. But they will get the benefit of not having to play in the Pacific, where it's just a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a wood chipper out in the Pacific. So it's going to be interesting, but I still think Dallas has it.
I like it. All right, let me crack my knuckles here. All
right. Here we go, baby. Let's go. Right. I'm excited.
Oh man, the pressure's on. The pressure's on. I'm still stretching. This is what you do when you're old. You got to stretch when you're getting ready to do this kind of monologue at my age.
Would you like me to intro you in, to lead you in?
I mean, you can intro me if you want to. I wasn't planning on it, but yeah, if you got something for me, Bryan. Of course.
But again, special guest, I guess. The aforementioned. Have
you heard about this? Have you seen this? Chase Thomas joining the show here.
Chase Thomas, that's right. But he's coming in. He's going to be previewing, for the most part, the Nashville Predators, and I'm very curious, as an outside observer, a man who again, if you don't know, is all over the place, covers a lot of sports, talks about them every single day. I'm very curious to see what he thinks and how much of it, hopefully we haven't influenced him too much to where, he knows the name Evan Rodriguez more than a lot of hockey fans do, just solely because of me. So I'm really excited. So let's see it, Chase. What do you think about these Nashville Predators?
All right, so we're starting off here with the Nashville Predators, where what's interesting at the top of the show that I didn't know we were going to talk about with them, and to get the pulse on where this team was headed. And Bryan, you kind of illustrated how this was going to be a tough year. You and Jeff are talking about, look, the rebuild is on. This is where things are headed. I think I disagree based on where we're at with the Barry Trotz era thus far. He comes in right away. I've seen this before. I've seen teams do this before. I've seen teams in the same state in different sports do this before. Tennessee Titans, Ron Carthon comes right in, shakes things up a little bit. Guess what? He's not tearing the whole thing down. He's like, no, I'm not doing all of this. We're not doing the bare bones. We're not doing the Pittsburgh Pirates stuff. We're going to see if we can bleed this to the middle. So I think what's interesting to me, and I think this is where we differ to start things off with the Preds, I don't think they are guaranteed to fall off a cliff. The Nashville Predators won 42 games last year. They went 42, 32, and 8. I understand that there are a lot of guys off this roster from that group. But here's what Barry Trotz did right away that screams to me, this man is not planning on being really, really bad going into next year. And that the plan is not to be Chicago. The plan is not to be Arizona. The plan is not to be the Montreal Canadiens. He bought out Duchesne. He traded Johansson. Those were big moves. And it signals, hey, a transition. And that's what it is. A transition from a previous era to a new era of Nashville hockey. But I think there are three parts here. And if you look at the roster going into next year for the Nashville Predators, here is where you're seeing like, oh, I know your game, Barry Trotz. I'm doing the meme there. Ryan O'Reilly gets signed, right? And I think when we talked about it on the program, we we're like, that's kind of weird. Why would you sign Ryan O'Reilly with this group? Is it really needed? And then you look at it and you're like, Roman Yossi's still here. And I want y'all to walk through the ages. Philip Forsberg will turn 30 this year. Ryan O'Reilly, 32. Cole Smith, everyone's favorite in Nashville, 27. Gustav Nyquist, 34. We can go to Jakob Trenin, 26. That's a young one. But then you go down. Oh, who is that? Luke Evangelista? Is he 21? Philip Tomasino? Is he 22? Tommy Novak, 26? What are you seeing there? They're going to take this very slow. They are not throwing these guys to the wolves. The plan is not to just throw them out there and you're our number one line. You're going to be our go-to. Get ready. You're the future. The future is not now in Nashville. And I think if Preds fans are expecting the bottom to fall out, I don't think Barry Trotz is planning to do that. You look at who's Ryan McDonough, 34. Roman Josi, 33. Luke Schenn, Jeff's favorite signing from this offseason, 33. UC Saros, 28, turning 29 this year. Guess who's 21? Got a ways to go. Everyone's favorite on this very program, Askarov. He's not coming down the pike anytime soon. Sorry, Bryan. I don't think that's happening. Here is what I'm saying. When you sign Ryan O'Reilly, when you are as aggressive in some ways as Barry Trotz was, when you're a former coach as Barry Trotz was, you think like a coach. It's hard to take off the coach. He doesn't want to saddle a new head coach and Andrew Burnett with a long-term rebuild because I think he still sees himself as like, what would I do? What would I want in a GM at this point? He would want a GM, I think, that would make this as easy as possible to get through this era, this tough one where it's not going to be big-time winning, but it doesn't have to be awful. There's going to be adults in the room. There's going to be talented players to help those young guys that everybody's excited about, whether it's Novak, Evangelista, Kamel, whoever. My thing is you keep the elite goalie who, let me just pull this up. Oh, guess who's number 2 in the Vezina Trophy odds for this year? UC Saros. It's going to be hard for a lot of teams to score on Nashville this year. And if UC Saros is a Nashville Predator for the full season, I have a hard time believing that the Preds are going to be an extremely bad hockey team and a team that gives up a lot of goals. I don't see that being the case. You also look at it. Guess who's behind them right now in some betting odds? Vancouver Canucks, Seattle Kraken. In terms of teams to win the Stanley Cup final this year, the Capitals, the Flyers, the Blackhawks, they are right there in the middle when you look at this. And it's because Nobody knows what to do with this team, but if Barry Trotz made his big moves and he is planning on keeping this quote unquote core, this veteran group together at the top lines for the duration of this season, this screams to me that they're going to be right about where they were. There'll probably be a few less wins there. I think you're looking closer to St. Louis from a year ago. I think you're looking at 37, 38, and 7 for the Nashville Predators. I think you're looking at a 500 type team. To me, this strikes me as a 10-game type drop-off from the talent that's out the door, but I think the plan is to wait on Kamel, to wait on Evangelista, to wait on Novak, to let these guys come along as they do in the time that it's going to take for them to get there. But I don't think this is a team that strikes me in this offseason that they're going to do a total rebound. They're doing a retooling, and they are playing the long game, but they are planning. If they can make the playoffs this year, I think internally they still are like, we missed the playoffs by what? 3 games? 3 points last year? I don't see it. I don't know if y'all disagree, but that is my Preds preview. I think they are going to be right there, and it's going to shock a lot of Preds fans that they are in the playoff race longer than any of us on this very program think.
I will say this. If the Nashville Predators make the playoffs next season, we will be 100% talking about Andrew Brunette being named Coach of the Year.
But also, is that out of the question? Is that if he's a slam dunk hire, what does that look like if he's really good right away?
I just think with this roster getting and the teams in this division, getting Nashville into the playoffs would be something that would get Brunette, some pretty important, distinction. I do, I can see a lot of where you're coming from on this. Ryan O'Reilly is a very good hockey player, and he's still going to continue to be a very good hockey player. There's still Roman Josi. I would say put him in top 5, top 6 of all defensemen. Philip Forsberg is still a premier talent. I wouldn't put him up, in those elite tiers. And he's got to stay healthy. He only played 50 games last season. But I mean, you look around him though, when Philip Forsberg in his 8th game, he became the 3rd youngest Predator to score a goal in history when he scored against the Minnesota Wild. Do you know how many players from that team on that roster that night are still with the organization?
I do not.
None. So Roman Josi was scratched that game, but it was.
I was gonna say one. I figured Josi would have been the one, but
yeah, I mean, and this is looking at guys like Seth Jones, Ryan Ellis, Shea Weber, Kevin Klein, David Legwand, Mike Fisher, Craig Smith, Rich Clune, Eric Nystrom, Hendricks, Hornquist, Paul Gustad, Colin Wilson, Matthias Ekholm, Gabby Bork, and Pecorine was in net. And so he's it. He is the veteran now. He's the guy, especially in that forward group. Yossi's been there, but there was always kind of that, Johansson, Ekholm, that kind of core there. But there's not that anymore. And who Philip Forsberg's line mates are going to be this year is very much in the air. And Ryan O'Reilly may be there just by putting one of the better forwards on the team with Forsberg, but you could make a case for 3 or 4 other guys to be up there. I think you can make a very strong case for somebody like Philip Tomasino. I think that he has done an extremely good job, and I think he's growing. We'll see, though. You might, depending on how you feel about Tomasino and where his career is going.
I was going to say Denis Gurianov.
That's the other. So again, there's that.
I kid.
They did lose a lot of their talent, but I think that it was time to move on from some of that talent. I think that we're going to see a lot of these former Predators, pop off and on their new teams this season. Matthias Ekholm is going to continue to be, I think, a really good player for the Oilers. Duchesne, Johansson. We talked in the last episode about Kevin Fiala. Those types of guys, they've all done well. And I think with the season Nashville had, it's not hard for them to do better. But, Nyquist is not a very good hockey player. Goryanov, they could be. Goryanov's a little bit of a reclamation.
I was going to say, I think the expectation that Denis Gurianov is going to be this 20-goal scorer again, I think is misplaced. But I don't think the notion is entirely wrong that he could, compete for for like he could make the competition a little bit more tight in training camp or whatever.
Still just 26.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of people think Tomasino is older than he is just because he's been playing the NHL since he was 19. But
yeah, he's 22.
Yeah, I mean he's still a young player. He's going to be an RFA after this year. Yeah, I mean I just don't think that. I think a guy like Gurianov could be an interesting middle six piece, probably bottom six if I had to guess, but he could be an asset on the second power play unit or something along those lines.
And someone's going to pop too, right? That's the thing that if you're a Nashville fan, you also have to be prepared for. Yeah, there's a lot of vets who are going to start and get a lot of ice time, but someone's going to pop. Like, we're going to see who comes out of camp, right? With Kamel, you have Fedor, you have some more talent in the pipeline, and you're all in on Tommy Novak, Bryan. So someone's going to pop as like a bigger goal scorer and a bigger factor for the Preds. And I'm not saying like superstar, but someone's going to pop and someone's going to break through. And that's something else you have to factor in when you move some of these older guys. It's more opportunities for these young guys